Okay. Utfila hu b'chinat nisim, shehu ein derech hateva. Prayer corresponds to miracles, for it too is supernatural. Ki lifamim hateva mechayev ezo davar. Sometimes the natural order requires one thing, and tefillah, prayer, can override teva, nature's course. It's a great word to know, by the way, if just a good vocab word. Teva, nature. Teva is nature. By the way, fascinatingly, the gematria, the numerical value of individual Hebrew letters of ha-teva is the same as Elohim, God. So there's a notion...
That's 430?
Yes. Hold on. No. That must be something else. Hold on.
Teva, like T-E-V-A?
Yeah.
Like
the shoes are made in Israel. Nature.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah.
That's all I
But it makes sense, right?
That's insane.
Because they're made for walking in nature. Exactly right.
And then there's
But most Americans call them, like, I've heard them called tivas or something.
Yeah.
But teva, it's a Hebrew word.
And there's some singing retreat at Isabella Friedman every year called Teva too or something, right?
Teva is also it's a nature education for children.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but so they take the kids out into the woods all day long.
Oh, okay.
So they encounter nature and God. Shalom, Hilton.
Shalom.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Do we have extra, is there an extra wide packet?
Is that two of the same?
Yeah. Sure.
Okay.
Here's another small packet. You can pass that down to Hilton, the smaller one. Okay, so, and you know what? I have my book. I don't need that. Okay, so nature. Prayer can change nature. And now it gets very serious. Ve'ikar hanisim hainu ikar hatfila einu ela be'eretz Yisrael. The root, the core of prayer is in Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel. Kamosh katuv shchan eretz urei emunah, dwell in the land and cultivate faith. The emunah zet tefillah, as we've already learned earlier. Faith is prayer, and he quotes again this verse he cited multiple times about Moshe fighting against Amalek. Vahi yadav emunah, his hands were steadfast, which he's going to translate as faith. Prayer is faith. So he's now made a central connection that the core connection, geographic connection of prayer, miracles, and faith is the land of Israel. And as we're going to see, he's seeming to mean the land of Israel both physically, the actual landscape, slice of land in the Eastern Mediterranean, but also a metaphorical place that we all have access to in ourselves at wherever we are. Like everything we've seen in Rebbe Nachman, he's talking about multiple things at once. They are both true. And that's only two. Sometimes he's talking about 3 or 4 things at once. And that's part of the beauty, but also it makes this text a little difficult. That is why the land of Israel is higher than other lands. We said last time that people talk about making aliyah, moving to Israel, is going up, going physically. It's because the sages believed that the land of Israel was physically, geographically higher. Now, what would they do about the fact that nowadays we know that there are, in fact, mountains that are higher, more above sea level? Good question. That's for next week. Even though we don't have class next week, or especially because we don't have class next week. Uchtiv harimi nes. There's a proof text. Ubishvil zen nikret eretz Canaan. Canaan lashon socher bechenat amenach hamashgotav amarachasi v'vatecha. That's also the land of Israel in the Torah is called Canaan. Canaan is Aramaic for socher, someone who trades, and trade is also faith, because faith surrounds you. There's a verse that your faith surrounds you, and Canaan is a trader, and traders are someone that go around. Fine. I want to move to the next part, which I find more important. Eretz Yisrael shotat chila. The land of Israel drinks first. This is a notion that now we're going to get into rain and water. There was themes of rain and water in the beginning of this Torah, and now we're coming back at the end of the Torah to themes of rain and water. For those of you that don't recall or were not here, this entire Torah that we've been learning, this is our 5th session, was based on a verse in Parshat Bishalach, which we read in synagogue 5 weeks ago. 5 weeks this Shabbos, which is that the Egyptians sank like stones in the Red Sea. Was the waves crashed on them. So there was an early water depths reference, and we're getting back to that now. Then it came up again in the Noah story, but that's fine. So, if you want to see that, by the way, that's at the top of your source sheet on page 11 in this other packet. You should see at the top. It says, Eretz Yisrael, it's 4 lines from the top of the page. On the left-hand side in the English, Eretz Yisrael drinks rainwater first. It drinks this notion that rain in the world falls on Israel first and then goes elsewhere. Again, we'd have to think about what that means. Now, and we're going to get the word, we've been waiting for it from the very beginning, V'hageshamim ba'im mit tehomot, and rain comes from the depths. The depths. This is what we know physically. We call this the water cycle. We have an engineer here, and there's groundwater. Groundwater, it's in the ground. It comes up. It cycles up to rain. It comes back down to the oceans, to the rivers. There's a cycle. Torah was aware of that. The rabbis, sages were aware of that. Rabbi Nachman is aware of that. But he's going to really hone in on the term the depths, tehomot, the depths. The Jewish literature and Jewish thought understands there to be really this cycle of water existing in 2 places, under the earth and in the heavens. There's, when the Noah story, the flood, came from below and above, rain coming down, rain coming up. There's midrashim, there's rabbinic stories about water that was threatening in King David's time. And King David, that was to come up, and he managed to quell that water. So Rabbi Nachman is understanding there's the bottom, the depths below, and the depths above.
Are you saying when you talk about David, there's some things that I've read a while back about when Solomon laid the foundation for the temple and the water?
That pierced a plug, exactly right, which had been keeping the original waters of creation down below. And something in the building of the temple pierced that, and they start to rise until David threw, I don't remember what, into the water to calm it. And it says it receded 15 some unit of measurement. And that 15 units of measurement the water receded corresponds to the 15 Psalms, the Psalms of Ascension that David wrote. So that's all part of a broad midrashic web of associations. So we're not going to get into that, but I want you to be aware that that's some of what is happening in the back of Rabbi Nachman's mind. Okay. This refers to the rains which come from the deep. As is written, deep calls to deep. That's come up before. That the depths in the bottom call to the depths in the top. And that's similar to another association Rabbi Nachman made, which is that the depths in us call out to the depths in God. So there's a human depth and there's a physical depths. Now he throws in, remember, he started off this paragraph talking about miracles, and he notices that that word tahom, the depths, can also mean lashon nes, miracle. Kamosha katuv, now it should be on the, flip your big sheet over to where it says 107, 106.
That ties into the depths, also into what Rabbi Nachman was talking about with Noah, when the floods came and the depths were broken up.
100%. 100%. He doesn't say it explicitly, but 100%.
Yep.
So now he talks about Ruth, which is on your source sheet also, verse 43. Ruth comes back with her mother-in-law, Naomi, to Beit Lechem. And when they come back, V'tehom kol ha'ir. The whole city was amazed. And that's a miracle. Hainu al davar chidush. Matmihin. This is because over a miracle, something new and original, people are amazed. So as I think I mentioned last time, Rabbi Nachman here, he started out this paragraph talking about miracles. When we usually talk about miracles, we talk about what are miracles in the Torah. The sea splits, manna falls from heaven, 10 plagues, Here, though, he's talked about two miracles so far. Rain and Ruth and her mother-in-law, Naomi, returning to Bethlehem. So clearly Rabbi Nachman's notion of miracles that he's describing here aren't just what we might like supernatural in the sense we might normally think, but the supernatural within the natural, he's describing that as ein derech hateva, not the way of nature. So if rain is not the way of nature, I would wonder to Rabbi Nachman, well then what is the way of nature? But he seems to be saying no, even the mundane, the natural, there's a godly, more than teva idea. This is also why the sages say that. And now he quotes two things in rapid succession. The first thing he quotes is from the Song of Songs, chapter 2. Beautiful poem that is described as the Holy of Holies by Rebbe Akiva. This is in number 44 in your source sheet. For now the winter is past, the rains are over and gone, the blossoms have appeared in the land, the time of pruning has come, the song of the dove, or the voice of the dove, is heard in our land. That's what it says in the Song of Songs. The sages, back here, the sages read that line and they say, oh, that is a reference to rain. The sages say that the time when the doves are heard, that's a reference to rain. Because why? Says Rabbi Nachman, for in the land of Israel, the place of Tehomot, Hainu Hanisim, Hainu Emunah, Hainu Tefillah. For in the land of Israel, the place of the deeps is the place of miracles, the place of faith, the place of prayer. And that is the main idea of the rains being heard. So he's drawing on this Talmudic piece, which says that the land of Israel is the place where rains fall. Rain is the land of Israel, is the depths, is miracles, is faith, is prayer. And I like how in the English on page 107, how the editors of this book wrote deeps/miracles/faith/prayer. That is all you need to know to understand how this learning we've been doing for over a month now, it comes to a place where you can't really divide it anymore. It's so layered. It's deeps, it's miracles, it's faith, it's prayer, it's rain, it's the land of Israel. He's just building these, it's all of them. What does that mean? Are those all the same thing? No, those are different things, and they're also all the same thing. That's what Rebbe Nachman has done in this Torah. He's just built a web of associations, such that now that we're at the end of the Torah, it's all coming together. It's all one. And now he's going to do a beautiful and just brilliant, breathtaking thing. There's an idea in Jewish thought that God makes things, When God makes one thing, he makes another thing as an opposite to it. You could call that, it's like yin and yang. There's always things exist as a push and a pull. So if there's a place which is miracles, prayer, rain, faith, deeps, Eretz Yisrael, land of Israel, what's the other thing, intention? The land of Egypt, Mitzrayim. Okay? God made one to contrast the other. And the land of Egypt is the antithesis. In Hebrew, the word for it is hefech, which literally means opposite, of the land of Israel. And he cites an incredible thing from Exodus chapter 14, verse 27. If you want to look in your source sheet, it's the top of the net, page 12. It's number 46. The Egyptians were fleeing against it. Okay, so Exodus chapter 14 is also Parshat Bishalach, which as it was the opening line of this whole Torah. Moses held his arm to the sea, and the sea is splitting. And what did the Egyptians do? They ran. But the key into the word for running is nasim.
That's like miracle, no?
Exactly. What the Egyptians doing is fleeing. They see a miracle, they run. Nasim. What do the Israelites see? Nisim. Same spelling, same exact spelling, one small vowel change. But for Rebbe Nachman, that one small vowel change is all we need. It changes a miracle, which is what the Israelites see, which we go towards. We lean into it. The Egyptians run away from it. Nisim, nasim. Opposites. Opposite reaction. Egypt is the converse of the land of Israel. The converse of Nisim. Again, Nasim versus Nisim. And this is why prayer has no place in Egypt, as in, when I go outside the city, I will spread out my hands in prayer. This is incredible what he's doing. Okay, he's quoting from somewhere else in Exodus, earlier. Parshat Va'era, which is 2 parshiot before Bishalach. It's the 6th plague. 7th plague of Barad, hail. 7th plague of hail. And Pharaoh says, the hail is destroying everything in Egypt. Pharaoh says, Moshe, please stop it. Go, stop it. Do what you got to do to stop it, and I'll give you what you want. And Moses says, I'll do that. I will walk outside of Egypt, outside of the city, and I will spread out my hands in prayer. Now, if you were just reading the Torah, that would seem to you like not a very significant detail. But Rabbi Nachman says, no. Don't you get it? Moshe says he's going to pray. Pharaoh says, pray. Moshe says, I'll pray. But where do I have to pray? Not here. I have to leave. I have to go out of the city. It's the same polarity. If the land of Israel is faith, prayer, depths, rain, miracles, and Egypt is the opposite, so it's the opposite of prayer. So when Moshe is going to pray, he can't pray in the city where Pharaoh is. He has to go outside. So far, Rabbi Nachman has shown us 2 opposites. Opposite number 1 was miracles. For the Israelites, we see nisim, but the Egyptians, nasim, flee. Then there's prayer. Moshe in land of Israel is prayer. Moshe is prayer, faith, but he has to pray. He has to leave Egypt.
What Egypt's meaning is constriction?
And he will get to that.
Okay.
So we'll talk about that when we get there.
Okay.
Yeah, because you're right.
Was Midian not in Egypt?
So
Or somewhere on the border.
Yeah, and this is not exactly precise because we also know the city.
Yeah.
He says literally, I have to leave the city.
Like,
The city's still in Egypt,
Yeah.
and the Israelites were
Yeah.
living in Goshen, which was an area in Egypt. So you are correct. A little bit of poetic license.
mm,
But
Be-
the catch is there was light in Goshen, but there was darkness everywhere else.
Yes, it's very good. So there were distinctions even within the lands. Bishvil zeh. Oh, and now this is fascinating. So obviously, I think every part of this is fascinating. Bishvil zeh, kshepagam Avraham be'eretz Israel. This is why when Avraham blemished the land of Israel, what does that mean? When God promised him the inheritance of the land, and Avraham asked, "How shall I know?" Okay, what is that talking about? This is number 48 in your source sheet. God, in Genesis chapter 15, Parshat Lech Lecha, which is the Parsha where we are basically introduced to Abraham. God says to Abraham in Parshat Lech Lecha, I'm going to make you the progenitor, the father, the patriarch, you and your wife Sarai. You two are going to be the foremother and forefather of a people. And he says, took him outside and says, look towards the heaven and count the stars, which for those of you that have been here every week, that should already ring some bells. The stars. But that's not the line that we're going to focus on. So God says to Avram, you're going to be the guy. And Avram says, look at the last line. He said, O Lord God, how shall I know that I'm going to possess it? And God then, there's a whole thing that then happens, a whole ritual. If we just read that, I would have said, okay, that seems like a fair question. Abraham wants some assurance.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a rabbinic, midrashic idea. If you turn to the next page, number 49, look to the middle of that source. It's like halfway through the paragraph. In bold, it says, Rabbi Abahu said. Do people see that?
Mm-hmm.
Rabbi Abahu said, that Rabbi Elazar said, for what reason was Abraham, our patriarch, punished and his children enslaved to Egypt for 210 years? Shmuel said, because he challenged the Holy One, blessed be, as it is stated, how shall I know that I shall inherit it? There is a midrashic idea that Abraham messed up by basically questioning. Again, I don't think that is the most obvious or straightforward reading of Genesis chapter 15. If I just read that on my own, I would have thought that seems like a legitimate question. And indeed, by the way, there's other commentaries that think it was a legitimate question, but there's one idea that says he questioned.
And what about look toward heaven and count the stars? Could that be taken to mean just keep producing Bnei Israel, people until it's as many as the stars?
That is absolutely what that is taken to mean, that your progeny will be like the stars.
As many as the stars.
That is the promise.
Yeah.
And Abraham, according to this reading, should have said, okay, that's beautiful,
Yeah.
but how shall I know? Remember that at this point, Abraham does not have a child, especially an Isaac, that he really will want to be the first. Ultimately, Abraham ends up having a bunch of children, so it works out fine. But he doesn't know that. So according to this idea that this is a question that's a challenge, now back to Rebbe Nachman. What should Avraham have done? He should have had faith. Had emunah. This is happening in the land of Israel. So according to Rebbe Nachman, what is Avraham doing? He's blemishing the land of Israel, which is faith, which is prayer, which is miracles. And Avraham is blemishing that. And look, so now I think, hold on to your heads because your heads might explode in the next couple lines. It became necessary for our ancestors to go down to Egypt. It was Abraham's blemishing of faith of the land of Israel, the aspect of miracles, which resulted in Yaakov and his sons descending to Egypt, the antithesis of the land of Israel.
And I remember, like, right, probably during Lech Lecha, it says, but you will go to Egypt first before you get the land. And at that time, you're like, well, why? Why do you have to go to Egypt? We know the Exodus
Because your
story.
emunah wasn't strong enough.
But it doesn't say that in the Torah.
Exactly right. Rebbe Nachman is now
Yeah.
explaining a central question in yes, you're right, it's Parsha Lech Lecha, but it's really a central question in Israelite and Jewish biblical history, and we're coming up in Pesach in 5 weeks, so it's...
Abraham did go to Egypt himself too, right? Or no? Just
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
And that's where the Egyptian took Sarah to be his wife.
Yeah. So it's like, I mean, I've read that before too, is like everything that happened to Moses happened to Abraham first.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
So this becomes a theme in Jewish history that we go down to come back up. But it's all, so let's just take a step back. What he's claiming is not, so one idea, the surface level is this is a punishment. Abraham is punished and his offspring are punished. They have to go to Egypt. But according to what Rebbe Nachman has set up, it's not just a punishment necessarily. It's like a natural, it's a tikkun. It's a result. We exist on this plane of miracles, belief, faith, Eretz Israel, rain, the depths. When we blemish that in any way, lack of faith, and not believing in miracles, then that is ipso facto, that is a descending into Egypt. It's not a punishment that we're descending. That's what that means. You're descending into Egypt. And then you have to climb out of there to get back. So it's both, in the biblical story, it's a punishment, but Rebbe Nachman is filling out our awareness and our understanding. It's a tikkun, it's a natural result. It's a natural, supernatural, natural. That's what has to happen.
You remember when you and I studied together, maybe last Pesach?
Yeah.
Just you and I showed up?
Yeah, remind me
And we talked about Abraham's life, and we went from Genesis 12, and we went over, I told you I was studying in Yaakov, in the New Testament,
Mhm.
and we went from James 2 to Genesis 12, James 2, Genesis 13, James 2, and it was a progression of Abraham, of his walk. And what James was saying in the time of Second Temple, he was making a comparison. He talked about Rahab. He talked about Abraham's faith. And as many of you all in this room know, the rabbis say that Isaac was 37 years old whenever Abraham offered him up. But from the time that Abraham first received the promise, that I believe was 75, till the time he was 137, that's 62 years. It took him 62 years to finally come to that place. God, you want my son? You got it. He'll be offered up in 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
And whereas with Rahab, in her comparison, she was the only person in the whole land of Canaan, though a Gentile, she was the only person with faith. And as soon as the spies came in, she received them. Her faith was like that. God saw her faith and made a divine appointment for her, sent 2 spies to save her and her household. Whereas with Genesis, with the story of Abraham, it was a progression. Abraham lies about his wife. Hey, look out for me. Say you're my sister. And as you go from chapter 12, chapter 13, chapter 14, chapter 15, it's a progression of his faith till finally in 22, I believe it's 22, where he raises the knife and God says, stop. Now I know.
So this is right. So this is this fits that narrative very well.
Mm-hmm.
This emerges then as a stumble into Egypt.
He wants full faith, and he's willing to allow us to sink a little bit into Egypt, but it's a lesson to learn.
Absolutely.
To bring us up.
Rebbe Nachman believes that is not just Abraham, not just Moses, but each one of us
Exactly.
all the time.
All of us.
And this becomes a paradigm that's going to happen again and again. We know it's going to happen, but we strive to grow every time. Now, why was it specific? Okay, so now he's talked earlier about Jacob and Jacob's children going into Egypt. Remember that in the second part of this Torah, which we read a month ago, so we'll jog our memory, that's what represents prayer. So according to Rabbi Nachman, who is it that is exiled to Egypt? Prayer. But it's both people, Jacob and Jacob's sons, but it's also an idea, a relationship. Prayer is exiled. So now we're on the top of page 108, 109. V'yardu dafka Yaakov uvanav. And it was specifically Jacob and his sons who went down. Why? Abraham blemished the land of Israel / prayer. And Yaakov and his 12 sons, who correspond to prayer in its 12 gates, descended. Mm-hmm. Moreover, because the quintessence of prayer is embodied in Jacob and his sons, no one merited the land of Israel in prayer other than Yaakov and his sons. As it is written, Abraham was told that in Yitzchak shall your seed be called, in Yitzchak, but not all of Yitzchak. That's meant to exclude, he doesn't say it explicitly, but that's meant to exclude Esau. Remember, everything has its opposite or its binary. So this is a fascinating idea because it's a little counterintuitive. Normally, Jewish thought does not look so kindly on Esau. This text says that Jacob and his sons actually have to fall deeper than Esau ever had to. But because of that, they're then able to go higher. So this, which is a really powerful idea, that the deeper you descend allows for a possibility of greater heights. And it's specifically Jacob and his sons, which is prayer, that goes down, can go up higher. This is not just Rabbi Nachman's idea. There's a general idea in Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism called Yirida Litzorech Aliyah. We already said that word Aliyah, which means a going up. Mm-hmm. So that Yirida is a going down. So a Yirida Litzorech Aliyah is a going down for the sake of going up. It's an idea that there's going to be time. It's what we're saying. It's the same themes coming up again. That your going down will enable you to go up higher, and your going up higher will necessitate a going down. And it's fascinating because it shows that Esav didn't have that kind of type of going down, but also meant that he doesn't have that kind of going up. Let us jump to the next paragraph down where it says, I saw the angel of rain. Do people see that on the left-hand side? This is going to be the final piece of Talmud that he's going to really cite at length. He's cited so many pieces of Torah, Zohar, and Talmud. This is the last major one. So if you've been bearing with us so far, Ashrecha, good for you. And we've got one more major one left to do. Here we go. This is a quote from the Talmud, Tractate Ta'anit, the Tractate of Fasting. We might have talked about it before, and it's because this tractate has the texts that deal with rain, which is why he's quoting several of them in a row. So the text cites a rabbi, or Rabbah. This is, by the way, if you want to see it in the source sheet, it's at the back of the packet. Page 14. Rabbah said, I have seen the angel of rain. It had the appearance of an ox, and its lips were split open. It was standing between Tehom and Tehom, deep and deep. Remember that we said that there's the lower waters and the upper waters. So Rebbe had a vision of the angel of rain. Now let me just bracket for a second. What does this mean that there's an angel of rain? How do we understand in Jewish thought? Doesn't God control the rain and the water? The answer is yes, but the answer is also that some streams of Jewish thought symbolize the aspects of God that bring rain as an angel. And we actually talk about that angel specifically during the holiday of Sukkot. There's a blessing that we insert into the prayers where we're sort of asking kind of that angel for rain. It's a tricky. But anyway, Rebbe sees the angel of rain. It looked like an ox, and its lips were split open, and it was standing between the upper and lower waters. He is now going to go word by word through that Talmudic story and learn out something. Here we go. This is the meaning of what our sages taught, that when the rains are falling, even a pruta in the purse is blessed. A small coin in the purse is blessed. Now, before we get into what he means by that, that's a separate Talmudic idea. It's a beautiful idea that when it's raining, everything is blessed. And the way I understand that Gemara is like, what's an English, do we have an English idiom? When it rains, it pours. That's a bad thing, right? Mm-hmm. What's a thing like when it's good, everything is good? Is there a phrase like that?
Something about if it rains on your wedding, you'll have a life of good luck.
This seems to be related to that. I feel like, okay, what it's saying is, if you have a coin in your pocket, this text is understanding that rain is good, right? Mm-hmm. Rain is good. When it's raining, everything is good. It's like the money in your pocket, mm-hmm. It goes further. It'll buy you more.
Like the more the merrier.
Kind of like the more the merrier. Yeah. When it's good, it's great. When it's raining, even the coin in your pocket is blessed.
That's right. So I want to say the same thing.
You know, and we kind of have times like that in our life, right? You hear good news in your professional life, and then you go and you see that there's 2 for 1 on avocados at the store. Like, oh, baby, it's all happening. That's essentially what that Gemara is saying. But what he's going to do is going to note that the word for coin, which is pruta, that the word for coin, pruta, is the same word that the Gemara uses for split open lips of that angel, which is prita. Do I have the spelling there in Hebrew? I lost. Don't worry. So, oh yeah, that doesn't make any sense on its own.
Siprita.
Okay.
No, Siprate.
Yeah. Prita sivate. Yeah. Okay. Let's see what he means. The pruta corresponds to the voice of the dove, which proclaims miracles, which we saw earlier. As the sages also taught, I saw the angel of rain. It had the appearance of a tor, ox. He's doing an interesting thing, which is that the word tor can mean in Hebrew, dove, or in Aramaic, ox. Earlier in the Song of Songs, he said, we hear the voice of the dove, and that means rain. But here, the same ox is the angel of rain. This is a brilliant connection between ox and dove. Only he could do that. It had the appearance of a tor, an ox, and its lips were prita, split open, which is like pruta, the coin in the purse. It was standing between the upper deep and the lower deep, meaning it comprised the two deeps, the embodiment of all miracles. V'zeh pruta shebakis. This is what it means to say that the coin in your pocket is blessed. Sometimes, now this is the word for pocket. This is incredible. The word for pocket is kis. Okay? Pocket. But the word for covered up is kisui. So kis, pocket, covered, which is pretty clearly related, right? Your pocket is something which covers up what you want to cover up.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the power of miracles is nitkaseh, covered up. But when it rains, the pruta, the coin, the miracle, is blessed. Its lips are open. With the lips open, the pruta is blessed. Miracles are uncovered. He's just sort of ripped off a bunch of associations in a row. When it's raining, everything is blessed and it's revealed. All the depths are revealed. Higher, lower, rain, miracles, land of Israel, sustenance. Also, by the way, its lips are open. How do Jews start their prayers? With a line, Hashem sifatai tiftach. God, open up my lips. So in this one, like 2 lines, he just pointed to, he just brought together everything he's been doing. Water, miracles, depths, land of Israel, prayer, faith, open miracles. Here we go. End run to the end. Top of page 111. We're getting there.
Isn't there a famous work called The Voice of the Turtle Dove? A book?
Kol HaTor.
Kol HaTorah?
Yes. Yeah, but I can't remember what book that is now. But yes. Here we go. Now he's going to bring in something new that we might seem a little out of left field, and it's a little, he's going to make a little political statement here. There are people who deny all miracles and say that everything comes about naturally. Even when they witness a miracle, they cover it up with natural explanations, attributing it to the natural course of things. By doing so, they blemish prayer, because prayer corresponds to miracles which alter nature. They also blemish faith, because they do not believe in divine providence. And they blemish the land of Israel, the place of miracles, as in the voice of the dove is heard in our land. And the sages taught the land of Israel drinks first, for the Tehomots are there, the place of miracles, as in the entire city was Tehom, was amazed. So that's a whole new idea that he's introduced now. That if you see a miracle, believe it and know that it's a miracle.
Yes.
And if not, you are blemishing faith, prayer, and the land of Israel. Now, that's a pretty harsh concept, especially when you think about, when I first read this text, I thought, but the first example that came into my head is that there are people who will look at the splitting of the Red Sea and say, try to come up with scientific explanations.
Low tide.
Low tide, maybe there was an algal bloom, which maybe there, also the Torah itself says there was a wind that was blowing. So they do all this, and they say maybe they crossed it in the, and maybe he's saying, don't do that. The Torah says there was a miracle. Believe there was a miracle. Okay, I could hear that. But remember that one of the central miracles he's talked about is rain. So that's a much bolder claim. He's saying you can't even say that rain is natural and talk about the water cycle. Like maybe that is too scientific for him. So that's tough. And if you really follow that, then that's saying you kind of have to close your ears to much of science. And if that is what he is saying, I certainly would struggle against that. So I think there's
The Hasidim believe that, and they don't educate their children scientifically.
I think there's a lot. I think there's a wide spectrum in how not just Hasidim but ultra-Orthodox Jews educate their children. Some, I think, have very good scientific backgrounds and educations. Some less so. And then within that, but then there's
See, I would say that that science and believing in miracles don't have to be so exclusive. Like, I feel like the further we go with science, like, the more miraculous. It's just like, this is happening on a quantum level? Like, what is rain doing on a quantum level? It's a miracle.
Yeah, isn't nature itself a miracle? Isn't that God?
Well, he's definitely said that so far. But I think what you're saying, Jacob, is maybe the best.
It's like, we explain things, but the origins are still mysterious and pretty amazing.
That seems to me to be, for a modern person, to be the pinnacle of what we can do, is to find God within what we know to be true.
I think that's what the Rambam talks about, is that the study of science, you'll understand God.
Oh! Alvis. One of the most beautiful lines, I know this is what you were referring to, one of the most beautiful lines in the Rambam says, if you want to know about God, go outside and look at the stars. He says, ponder the cosmos, and you will, which he understood to be science, and you'll come to understand, there's got to be, it's miraculous. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a great example.
You ever heard the story about Albert Einstein and the housekeeper who was taking care of his house? She came into his study and she asked him, Mr. Einstein, do you believe in God? And his quick reply was, yes, I'm always trying to catch him at his work.
It's beautiful.
Yep.
So that's it. That's exactly it. So that's a beautiful idea. And as a result, if you don't do that, which according to how we've just read it, is if you fail to find God in the natural workings, that's a blemish. That's a blemish too. Faith, prayer, land of Israel, rain, the depths. And a result of this blemish, the land of Israel, you fall into exile of Egypt. As the Midrash states, and this gets to what Fritz said, all exiles are known as Mitzrayim because they Meitzarim, the Jewish people. The word in Hebrew for Egypt is Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim. And Mitzrayim has the root Meitzar, a narrow or constricting, what is he causes anguish and suffering. So the land of, every time you, me, one of us does this, we fall into exile, into Egypt. Again, when he says Egypt, it's just like when he says Israel. It's a physical place, but it's a place that so according to this, every day or every week or every month, all of us are going through a cycle of falling into Mitzrayim, into a dark place, and disbelief, lack of relationship, and coming back out of it. It's incredible. Okay, friends, we began some time ago with the opening line from Parshat Beshalach, Exodus chapter 15, about the Egyptians being covered in the water. You don't have this in your packet, but it's back. I gave it on the first day. Tehomot yichasyumu yardu v'mitzolot kamo aven. The depths covered them. They sank into the depths like a stone. Let's say that one more time. The depths covered them. They sank into the depths like a stone. And now we're at the end of the Torah. He's going to revisit that line and tell us what he thinks it means now. Vizeh Perush. This is the explanation of the opening verse. I just want you to know, he says this, meaning everything that we have been learning for the last month, now we're ready to explain one verse in the Torah, right? That's what we've been doing. We can do this one verse now. The depths covered them. This refers to people who cover up the miracles and try to show that everything follows a natural order. They sank into the mitzolot, the depths, like a stone, an Evan. Evan is stone. And there's a verse in Genesis, from there, the shepherd, the rock of Israel, the Evan of Israel. And there, the Aramaic, onkelos, Aramaic translation of Evan is understood there as Av Uvnan. Just let me show you this up here real quick. The word for rock, stone, that they sank like a stone, is Aleph Bet Nun. Aleph Bet Nun. The Aramaic translation, it's Aleph Bet Nun, does a kind of play on words and says it's Av and Ben. The first and second letter is one word, Av, which means father.
Father and
Son,
sons.
father and son.
Father and son. Rock becomes father and son. It's a nice play on words. So who are the father and sons that we read about so far in this Torah multiple times? Who are the father and sons?
Abraham, Isaac.
Abraham, Isaac, Jacob.
12 sons.
Jacob and his 12 sons. So who is sinking into the depths? Av Uvanan. Father and sons. Jacob and the 12 tribes fall into the water. The Mitzolot, the deeps. This alludes to Egypt. Because that word Mitzolot is related to another verb. They despoiled Egypt. Fine, don't worry about that. Next page. Like a rock. This is Avhan Uvanin, the father and the sons. It alludes to Yaakov, Jacob, and his sons, who correspond to prayer, miracles, land of Israel. In exact proportion to the blemish cast on prayer, faith, the land of Israel, they must accordingly go into the depths of the exile of Egypt, just as Yaakov and his sons descended into Egypt, because Abraham asked, "How will I know?" with regard to inheriting the land. So the image is a rock falling into water, the depths. Anytime I, you, us, the Jewish people don't have a lack of faith, have a lack of belief, have a lack of connection, have a lack of seeing God in the world, that is, you can read it as a punishment, but you can also just read it as a natural progression or regression, a devolution of falling like a stone in water, like Jacob and his sons. Prayer is in exile. We fall. The land of Israel, prayer, miracles, faith, the depths, into the dark depths. And recall, I think that's the end of the Torah. It ends a little dark. And at first when I read it, I said, that's a little bit of a dark ending. But I think what Rabbi Nachman's doing is, if you recall 3 sessions ago, he already talked about being surrounded in darkness and how to get out. So he's already talked about the solution. So if it's I think at first glance it might sound like a foreboding kind of pessimistic ending, but I think Rabbi Nachman is implicitly alluding, he already told us it's a cycle. He's just talking about one part of the cycle. It goes down.
He's talking about the yang.
Yeah, but he already told us about the yin.
Yeah.
We already know the answer. That was Noach and the ark and truth in our words and finding light and relying on sometimes on yourself and sometimes on the tzaddik and learning Torah and prayer. We already talked about that. So that's what brings you back up. And then you're going to, so the whole Torah, This is functioning on so many levels because within the Torah there are descriptions of cycles. Water cycle, going down to Egypt and going back to the land of Israel. Noah in the ark. Your words are. It started out with our prayers going up and coming back down. Light going up and down. So there's cycles within the Torah. And then the whole Torah itself is a cycle, talking about generally individuals and groups going up and going down. Fritz.
Wouldn't Egypt, I was reading some rabbinic works a while back. Egypt, darkness is like the womb. Jacob took 70 down there, but they were not a nation. And out of that womb was birthed a nation there. And also in my notes from the first study that you did, the scripture says, the deeps covered them. They sank into the depths like a stone, referring to the Egyptians on that part. Before, I just mentioned how Israel went down into the womb and came out a nation. Here it refers to the Egyptians themselves sinking like the depths of a stone. And why? I mentioned this to Rabbi a few weeks ago. Why did the Egyptians sink like a stone? Because their hearts were hard like a stone.
But what's interesting, I want to note, is that what Rabbi Nachman is doing is, right, the Torah, that is describing the Egyptians, but he associates that with the Israelites.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same, Jacob.
But there's no redemption for Egyptians.
Well, in the biblical story, no. But to the degree that all of us become like that, yes.
Yeah.
One of a very radical, I would say, a very radical piece of this Torah is it equates in certain ways all of us, is Jews, general people, anyone can have an aspect of Egypt. And also remember in that Talmudic story about the tradesman who smells earth, who was the Mashiach, that was an Ishmaelite trader. So and multiple times in this Torah, he makes very, I think, powerful and beautiful associations with figures who are sometimes othered by our tradition and says, no, that's also us, or we should strive to be like that, or that can be us, or we can be them.
There's a midrash after leaving Egypt that says that only 20% of the Jews actually left. That leaves 80% behind. And I think I told you this once. Rabbi Ora gave this really nice sermon. I think she was reading a poem that someone else had written that said that the first time they left Egypt, the Egyptians were left behind, in parentheses, 80% of the Jews. The next time we leave Egypt, everyone's coming with us, which is a nice idea as well.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. But according to Nachman, the Egyptians are primed right now for some revelation. If they're going to sink into the depths, they're going to come. They're going to come out pretty smart and with some strong faith.
Yeah. This is I find this to be an incredibly optimistic Torah, but not unrealistic, meaning it acknowledges darkness and it acknowledges suffering and pain and times when someone can feel alone or they don't know how to find their way out, but it believes that it is possible and it can happen, and it tries to give some concrete steps for him. The concrete steps are try prayer, study, connect the Torah, connect the truth, and connect yourself to the righteous of the generation. And the next piece of Torah that we're going to learn, that I'd like to learn of his, which I don't think will be until after Pesach, so not at least until April.
How many of these Likutei Moharan are
Hundreds.
and you just picked this one?
I'll tell you why I picked this one. Because I had this volume,
Okay.
and it has 10 in this one. There is literally hundreds. And
And they're all as layered and as deep and,
No, some of them are much shorter and a little more, or simpler. Some are more complicated.
but these aren't the stories they tell.
No, that is something totally different.